Hello, folks. How's everybody doing out there? Uh, welcome. This is Why I Hate the World. My name is Mark. Sorry that it took me so long to get going. I see that we do have one person watching. Modern Muck Movement. How you doing, man? Thank you for waiting. I had some problems with my monitor setup back here. I think I really just need to invest in all new equipment, to be honest. I'm kind of using a Frankenstein's monster of a computer back here of just different parts that are all stuck together or whatnot. But anyway, thankfully all that's over with and we can get on with the stream. So, welcome. We have a lot of stuff to talk about again today. So let's jump right into it. Let's see here. So, before we start, this is what we were working on last time. You know, kind of a weird wall of monster flesh kind of stuff with eyes and teeth and, other disgusting, ropey things sticking out. And, you know what? Let's continue on with this for a little bit. This kind of thing's sort of cheating to me, because this I can draw this without really pushing myself. To be honest, this is really not, this kind of thing here is not very challenging to me, at all. But anyway, that's okay, because it'll allow me to focus more on the stream, and what I'm talking about and all that stuff. So, well, let's just jump right into it. I'm sure this story is a little old, because this happened last weekend. So it's been about 7 days since these events. But I want to talk about how in Washington, D.C., we had the second Million Maga March. I'm sure if you guys remember this, where, of course it wasn't anywhere close to being 1 million people. A couple thousand at most, which is actually kind of good news in my opinion. And the difference is this was basically an army of Proud Boys that sort of descended upon Washington, D.C. And, fascists gonna be fascists resulted in sporadic violence throughout the city, in where 4 people ended up being stabbed, right? So basically, Proud Boys show up, they start rioting like a bunch of hoodlums, and people end up getting stabbed, going a fucking stabbing spree. Thankfully, it appears that no one has actually been killed as a result of that. Also, at the same time in Washington, Seattle, a counter-protester was shot by a Proud Boy that same weekend at similar protests. There were multiple shooters last Saturday in Washington. One person was actually shot, and last I heard was alive. They were put in critical condition or whatever. And last I heard, they didn't actually die. So that's good news. I mean, you take whatever small amounts of good news that you can from these types of events, And the thing about it is that this has become, such a common, ordinary event in our lives in during a Trump presidency, where now we've all kind of just moved on from it. Thousands of insane, crazed right-wing protesters descend upon the capital city and break out into an orgy of violence where people are actually not just injured, but there's attempted murder going on. When you stab somebody with a knife, you're not just fighting them, That's not just like hitting somebody with a sign or punching them a little too hard or throwing a rock and hitting someone in the head or some shit like that. Or throwing a bottle at somebody. That's not like that. taking an actual weapon, like a knife, that's attempted murder. When you fucking stab somebody, right? You're trying to kill them, you know, and it doesn't matter if you stab them in the arm or some shit like that, or stab them in a leg or something, you know. You can sever an artery and really, you know, somebody can fucking bleed out and die, right? From a place that you would think would be a non-lethal stab wound. So this is serious shit. You know, this is like should be considered on the same level as a mass shooting. That kind of seriousness. You know, you don't stab somebody without the intent of you know, killing them, right? And I think that's the thing, is that people don't treat it the same, you know, because a knife is not a gun, and you're more likely to survive a stab wound than you are a gun, you know, firearm wound, right? And that's kind of the shitty thing about this. It's like, okay, so these are people, you know, these are basically a right-wing hate movement that's protesting because their candidate was unsuccessful at his attempt to steal the election. Right? That's what this is, you know. So when you see, like, in the news, when you say Proud Boys descend upon Washington, first off, the way they frame it, they never say it like, you know, they never, when it comes to right-wing protesters, they never call it a riot. You know, when they break out into violence like this, it's never a riot. You know, when it's left-wing protesters, they'll call it a riot. BLM rioted in downtown Portland today and burned down 17 buildings, and 8 people were injured and 25 were, you know, arrested. They'll say shit like that. You know, they'll easily, you know, the media will always characterize left-wing protests that get out of hand as a riot. And yeah, you know, maybe they are riots sometimes. Maybe they do break out into riots. You know, when you burn down buildings and shit, maybe that is a riot. Well, when you run around and beat the shit out of people and stab people, that's also a fucking riot. But you never see the media saying, you know, 25,000 Proud Boys descended upon Washington, D.C. and engaged in riots. You'll never see that. Right? So that's the first, like, you know, observation to bring home from this. The second one is like, well, no one died, so it was small news. I was like, yeah, okay, so there were fights, blah, blah, blah. 4 people were stabbed, but they're all alive. Let's move on. You know, and it's never, you know, and now we'll never probably ever hear about it ever again. Though there won't be any follow-up, right? They'll never report on, well, who were the people who were stabbed? Are they okay? Did they live? Did they ever catch the guys who did it? Nope, we'll never hear anything about that again. And it's most likely the police there are not even trying to figure any of this out. You know, you'll read in the articles, oh yeah, the you know, chief of police in Washington, D.C. says we're gonna, you know, investigate these. No, they're not. No, they're not. They're not investigating shit. They don't care, and it's because, you know, the police are mostly right wing. Excuse me. You know, the police are the ones who are coordinating with these fucking assholes, right? And that's, you know, if you read firsthand accounts of how these things go down in, you know, articles and all that other stuff, that happens, you know, that's a theme that you hear over and over and over. The cops, they approach right-wing protesters with kid gloves. They let them get away, right? When it comes to the left-wing people, they'll straight up shoot fucking, like, pepper balls and rubber bullets and, like, you know, rush the crowd and beat people and shit like that. When it comes to right-wing fucking protesters who are breaking out and, like, stabbing people and shit, they don't do a goddamn thing. They'll defend those people. And that's, you know, very, very dangerous shit. You know what I mean? Like, you know, this past election, when people were talking, there was a big fear on the left that this is what was going to happen on election night. And thankfully it didn't happen. You know, thankfully they didn't go out and start beating people and like, you know, rioting and trying to shut down polling places and stuff like that. They didn't do that kind of thing. So that's actually really nice, right? But the fear was there. And I think it's justified. It's justified in so much that the way that the police, approach right-wing protesters, they basically would have let them get away with it on election night, And I don't know if there's anybody out there who thinks that they wouldn't, but they would have. I mean, let's not bullshit ourselves, man. We kind of escaped, fascism, like officially kind of taking over the country by the skin of our teeth. And to be honest, I don't think we're actually like in out of the woods just yet. Not when we have movements like this, not when we have that, a hate group that can send thousands of people to a city and just fuck everything up and then not be held accountable at all. Right? Like, not when we have that kind of shit. When we have, essentially state-sanctioned fucking brown shirts. That's what they are. These Proud Boy assholes. I don't know if you've seen the Proud Boy t-shirt, Let me see if I can look that up here. Right. There is basically this yellow shirt that these guys are wearing, right? Let me see if I can find this. Let's see. There's like this Proud Boy yellow shirt that has like all of these fucking Nazi symbols and shit on it. Goddamn. Okay, there's one. All right, so there's a picture where these guys are flashing their butts. I'm not going to show that. But I'm going to say Proud Boy yellow Nazi shirt. Let's see if I can find that. Where the hell's the Nazi? Because see, these dickheads, they wear like polo shirts and everything because they think they're being ironic. Is that it? That's one of them. There was a thing, it was on Reddit. God damn it, I should have saved the picture. Should have saved the, let's see, Proud Boy Nazi shirt. How about that? If I take the word yellow out. Proud neo-Nazi shirts worn by Proud Boys. Supporters sold on Amazon. Are they going to show a picture of it? No, they're not going to show it. Damn it. There's an article, but there's no picture of the t-shirt here. Or maybe they will show it. Let me see if it boots up. Let's give it a second for this Newsweek fucking page, which is like, there it is. Okay. Okay, so let me show you my screen here. Sorry about that. So you guys see this here? This let me turn on this monitor, just make that bigger. Okay. This here is basically a t-shirt that all of these guys were wearing, right? This is on the name of the article here, neo-Nazi shirts worn by Proud Boy supporters sold on Amazon. Let me put this in the chat for you guys. Right. Scroll down, please. Thank you. So, yeah, if you look at this shirt, it has the, basically this Germanic eagle. This thing with an axe here, this is called a fasci. It's a fascist symbol that was in, Mussolini's flag, right? And then this SMWE means 6 million weren't enough. Or 6 million wasn't enough. It's basically a Holocaust-denying shirt. That's what this is. That's what these guys are fucking wearing. This was being sold on fucking Amazon, and Amazon took it down. Because it's like fucking Nazi shit that they're like buying on Amazon, for crying out loud. So it's like, yeah, the mask is off with these guys. There was a time where it was like, they would kind of like, hide it a little bit, and they would say shit like, oh, we have 9, non-white members in our group or whatever, so how can we be a hate group, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, the mask is off. Not anymore. There was a thing actually in one of the live streams about 3 weeks ago where like a splinter group splintered off from the Proud Boys and just basically like, stopped with the bullshit denials about them being a white supremacist group. Excuse me. Wait, God, this is like really good. I'm drinking this, by the way. This is not your father's root beer. It's like alcoholic root beer. It's the best shit ever. Anyway, yeah, so that's what this is, a fucking national, like a hate group with national reach, sending out goons to go like terrorize a city in support of the president of the United States, who failed, because he failed his political coup. Right. The president of the United States tried to steal the election and lost. And that's what these people are out there like trying to support. That's what it is. This is really dangerous territory. You know what I mean? We're like we're basically one step away from actual real fascists. like marching in the streets and carting people off to fucking concentration camps. I mean, don't think that it can't happen. That's a thing that you hear in the United States. Oh, this will never happen here. The power of our institutions will prevent that from happening. Never. That's bullshit. We've seen now how weak our institutions actually are. How much they actually rely on things that are not codified in the law. How much they rely on norms and and traditions and procedures that when somebody like the Trump administration come along and they just completely kick all that shit out the window. I mean, Donald Trump does shit this whole time when he was president, just would ignore congressional subpoenas. Right? That's one thing. The Congress is supposed to have the power to send a subpoena, and then you're supposed to go, because if you don't go, they'll throw you in jail. That's how it's supposed to work. And now we've seen that basically that power is, the president can just ignore that. Every time Congress would try to hold a hearing, try to hold people responsible, the president would just not send whoever they, he would say, oh, executive privilege, we're not going to send, whoever. And it's and then Congress would just not do anything. It's what the fuck are you doing? If, John Bolton doesn't want to show up, throw him in fucking jail. Right? That's what should happen. Every time, if William Barr doesn't want to come testify, when you send him a subpoena, you should throw him in jail. That's how it's worked. That's a Congress has that power. They have, that's in the Constitution, and they wouldn't do it. And it's why wouldn't they do it? Oh, it would cause a constitutional crisis, whatever. Well, yeah, okay. If you're not going to fucking challenge, what's the point of being a co-equal branch of government if you're not going to execute or exercise your, constitutionally given powers, right? And do you think for a nanosecond that the Republicans wouldn't do that themselves if they had, if the shoe was on the other foot, and let's say Mitch McConnell was in charge of the House, and, it was Barack Obama who was disobeying a fucking, subpoena. Do you think for a nanosecond that Mitch McConnell wouldn't throw whoever it was in prison until they, agreed to testify? Can you name the last time that happened? I think I can. I think the last time that happened was in 2001, maybe? I think it was Judith Miller was supposed to testify in front of Congress and she refused, and so they actually jailed her. So what is that, 19 years? 19 years have gone by since Congress has actually executed that power there. I mean, if you guys remember Judith Miller, she was basically she wasn't even part of the government. I guess it's okay when you're not part of the government. She was a journalist who wouldn't reveal her sources, right? And it had something to do with fucking the Iraq War or something like that. Basically had something to do with George W. Bush creating phony evidence for the Iraq War. All of that stuff seems so trite now, doesn't it? It's man, don't you wish we had those problems? Actual real corruption like that, and a Congress that would actually stand up to the executive branch. Don't you wish we had that problem instead of just, insane right-wingers running rampant around the country stabbing people, in support of a government that's fucking trying to destroy democracy? I mean, damn. I don't know. Anyway, So yeah, that was some scary shit that happened this last weekend. You know, if there's one thing I really hope the Biden people do, is that I hope they start taking right-wing terrorism seriously again, right? Because it's it's kind of like they just sort of are ignoring it, under Trump, under Bill Barr, right? Completely ignoring the threat from right-wing terrorism. And it's because these are the president's supporters. These are Donald Trump supporters. Donald Trump is, telling them to fucking stand by and shit, right? And that's what they're doing. They're encouraged by it. And now, once Biden takes over, this is usually what happens when you have a Democrat in the White House, is that the militia movement tends to go fucking crazy. You know, this is what happened when Clinton was in the White House. The militia movement basically was sort of just starting out. Like the militia movement actually began in the early 80s, and it started from disgruntled Vietnam vets who came back from, the Vietnam War, and who sort of joined up with like white supremacist groups, right? Groups like the KKK, that kind of thing, right? And they broke off and they started this militia movement. And what it was is that there was a meeting, and I can't remember exactly who put on the meeting, but the people that showed up were essentially the who's who of the white supremacist movement at that time. One of the guys was not Jared Taylor, but the founder of the Aryan Nations. Like, that guy shows up, and then like this reactionary preacher guy shows up. There's an article somewhere, I have to dig it up, that gives exactly who it is. And they essentially like started the militia movement, and then from that meeting, the idea kind of spreads around, because this is sort of pre-internet days, so it was like, there would be like articles on it in like fucking Guns and Ammo magazine and shit like that, and it sort of like brought in this like, like insane right-wingers on one end, and then on the other end like gun nuts and like fucking libertarians and like people who are prepping for like the second coming and shit. Right? And they all sort of like coalesced together and became this militia group. And yeah, okay, not every militia is racist, although they all seem to be. And you could technically, I guess, call groups like the Black Panthers militias, even though they really aren't, not from our modern definition. Right? So it's like, yeah, okay. And there are people that say that they aren't racist and they're part of militias and they just want to help and blah, 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 whatever. But this is where it came from. This is where it started. It started out of this sort of like bizarre marriage of like, Vietnam veterans and like fucking soldiers of fortune and shit like that, with like extreme right-wing insane people and straight up fucking white supremacists. And it's like, and that's why in the 90s, when Bill Clinton became president, they kind of like flew off the deep end. And this was like, in the early 90s, right? I think he started in 92. And it's that was right around, when they deregulated the they got rid of the fairness doctrine. So you started seeing like hate radio, people like Rush Limbaugh, that kind of thing. Stuff that you would normally be like confined to like AM radio started hitting the, mainstream. And you started seeing people like Rush Limbaugh and like fucking Ann Coulter and, Dr. Laura Schlesinger and all these people, became mainstream. And it was just like, that's when the rift that we see in the country today really started forming, was right around then. And sure enough, Timothy McVeigh comes around and blows up the Oklahoma Federal Building, right? Guy's like an insane right-winger, fucking racist hate monger and shit, right? Blows up the Federal Building in response to Ruby Ridge. I don't know if you remember what Ruby Ridge is, but You know, basically Ruby Ridge was just sort of like you know, a guy that was wanted for like illegal weapons charges. You know, held up in his cabin, and like the ATF like, you know, shot him and blah 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 blah. And it's basically Ruby Ridge is shit like Ruby Ridge happens all the time nowadays. You know. But this was a new thing back in the 90s, and it pissed off a lot of these people, you know, that were in this fucking, you know, early developing militia movement. You know, among them Timothy McVeigh, and he goes and he blows up the federal building. Right. Then Bush gets elected in 2000, and all of these guys kind of go to sleep. You know, we don't really hear about them for the next 8 years or so, and it's like, why? Well, how come all the militia assholes disappear the moment that, you know, there's not a... It's because George W. Bush was a Republican. That's why. He was a Republican. His administration, you know, although they weren't as overt about it, they also used all the same sort of racist dog whistles that we get from the Trump people, you know, but they were smarter. They were smarter about it. They knew how to, like, not say the quiet part out loud and all of that kind of thing, right? And that's why when you saw stuff like, you know, people being stranded in fucking during Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, and George W. Bush just not doing anything about it, not giving a fuck because they're all black people, right? This is all like, you know, this is all throwing red meat to their racist base, right? You know, if it was fucking, you know, Austin, Texas that was flooded or some shit like that, right? The Army Corps of Engineers would have been there within like an hour, evacuating people and draining the fucking city. But since it's New Orleans, which has, you know, a very large black population, and specifically since it was like, you know, the people who were in trouble, who were in the stadiums and stuff like that and during Katrina were African American, help just doesn't show up. Funny how that fucking works, you know? I don't know. I mean, yeah, kind of looks like it's on purpose to me. You know, you ever notice that? You ever notice that when, you know, and I don't mean to say this as like any kind of like, you know, dig against white people, but whenever white people are in trouble, you know, whenever there's like, you know, a disaster that affects white people, they kind of spare no expense to help everyone else, to help them out. You know, the tornado or some shit like that, or if there's flood, whatever, they get all the FEMA money they want, they get all the attention they want, right? They have fucking like concerts and shit, Farm Aid, that kind of thing, to like bail these people out. Whenever the people that are in trouble who are not white, fuck them. Nobody cares. And that's just, you know, there you go. I mean, I don't know, is that a cultural thing, right? Yeah, maybe. Maybe that's an expression of racism within our culture. But it's true. That's exactly what fucking happens. Anyway, Dinah Cat Loves Me, how you doing? Thanks for joining. Modern Monk Movement, thank you for joining too. But anyway, so, anyway, wanted to talk about that for a little bit. There is, you know, since that weekend, there has still been sporadic little hints of violence here and there around the country. Here's one story that I saw, which was interesting. And let me turn on my monitor here, and I'm going to have to rearrange it because it's all weird and large. Let's see if I can't rearrange this monitor so that it actually fits the screen instead of, because it's all like super huge. I don't know how that happened. I think I fucked it up somehow. There we go. Okay. Former Houston police captain charged with pointing gun at repairman, believing he was a voter fraud mastermind. Alright, so this is some scary shit. I hate CNN because I wish I could get rid of that fucking like top bar thing. So what's going on with this? Well, let's read a little bit of this, right? Because this is interesting and disturbing and cringeworthy all at the same time. Former Houston police captain was charged Tuesday with running a man off the road and pointing a gun to his head 2 weeks before the election as part of a baseless voter fraud conspiracy theory, the Harris County District Attorney said in a statement. Mark Anthony McGuire, 63, was paid more than $250,000 by a Houston-based private citizens group investigating unsubstantiated 2020 election fraud claims. So let me put this in the chat for you guys if you want to read it later. Oh, excuse me. Okay, fuck you. Close you. Essentially, this guy, fuck off. This genius right here, right, found this repairman. He was basically paid by a group. Let me go ahead and close this, right? Paid by a, as a private investigator, right? By a Republican, voting rights group, right? In order to investigate some fraud, investigate voter fraud, because the president for the last fucking 6 months has been telling everybody the shit's gonna be rigged, right? So this guy goes out and tries to find, this ex-police captain goes out, tries to find. Oh, did I put the thing in the? I didn't hit. All right, there we go. So yeah, if you want to read this later, there's the link. Goes out, tries to find some evidence of voter fraud, can't find any, and kind of zeroes in on this repair guy. And the reason why, it's because this guy was repairing stuff that was around the polls, right? So when you're a repairman, you bring in things into a building, toolboxes and shit. And so since this dude was going into this building carrying boxes and things, he must be one of the masterminds behind the big evil voting fraud shit that Donald Trump is telling this dude is happening. And so Aguirre told authorities he had conducted surveillance on the man for 4 days, and he suspected there were 750,000 fraudulent ballots inside the truck, and the man was the mastermind of a giant voter fraud. Right? And what he was is this dude was an air conditioning repairman. Right? So now I think this story is a really good illustration of what happens when people think conspiracy theories are real, right, without any evidence. Okay, so what happened here, right? This guy basically, ambushed him is what happened, right? He follows this dude around, sees that the guy's not white, number one, okay, thinks that he's part of some kind of, concocts in his head this ridiculous story that this man is part of some voter fraud shit, right? And then basically laid a trap for him. What he did is that he pulls over and flagged this guy down and was acting like he needed help, right? So the air conditioning repairman gets out of his car, walks up to him and is like, "Hey man, you need help? You want me to call, an ambulance or something?" Because the guy was acting like he was injured. And then ex-cop fucking insane person pulls a gun on him and tries, it says, "I'm going to do a citizen's arrest," right? And pulls a gun on him and then forces somebody else who was just driving by to go search this dude's truck. Like, flags down another guy at gunpoint and forces this guy to go search his truck. And nope, to find the ballots. And nope, didn't find any ballots. Keep in mind, this dude is not a cop. He's an ex-cop. All right? So he essentially, came within, a measurable distance of actually murdering somebody over an insane conspiracy theory that he had no proof for, and just thought that it was so important that he exposed this shit that he put this guy's life in danger. Every time you pull a gun on somebody, every time you pull a weapon out, especially a firearm, you're putting someone in danger, okay? Even if you have your finger off the trigger, if you're not, you'll see pictures where they'll have their guns and they'll have their finger out like that. It's not on the trigger, right? Even if your fucking hand is not on that trigger, even if the safety's on, you're putting someone's life in danger if you point a weapon at them, right? The gun could go off, right? They could try to run, they could try to fight you because they think you're going to kill them, and you might have, you might end up shooting them, some shit like that. They might take the gun from you and shoot you with it. That's another one. So, just pulling that shit out escalates the situation, right? And that's why, normal, ordinary citizens are not supposed to be able to do shit like that. That's why it's like you have police officers. Police officers at least are supposed to be trained in order to, even though they don't in real life, but they're supposed to be trained in order to minimize the risk of loss of life. But what ends up happening in real life is like, they don't. Right? We can talk about that later. That's a subject for another video. But still, that's why you don't have normal, ordinary citizens running around playing fucking vigilante, pretending that they're like Batman and shit, going out to stop, like, unearthed conspiracies or whatever. Like, that's why you don't have normal people, you're not supposed to do this shit if you're, like, not a police officer. Right? Even in this case, if this guy actually did uncover evidence of a conspiracy like this, he should have took his evidence and gone to the cops. Right? Instead, he decides that he's going to be like fucking, he's going to be the Punisher or some shit, and he's going to go do it himself and almost get somebody killed. And that's like, I mean, goddamn. I don't understand how anybody can think this. How fucking deranged do you have to be to think that real life is like a fucking Avengers movie or something? Right? That's what it is. That's what it is. This guy thought that he was going to be a superhero. The police can't stop them, right? They're all part, or else the cops are in on it. That's another, rationalization, right? And how did this guy get like this? After fucking, 6 months of Donald Trump telling him that the election was going to be stolen. That's what's going on here. Stochastic terrorism is what they call that. When you encourage violence, yourself, but without actually, like, saying it. Like when Donald Trump, like, jokes about Hillary Clinton being assassinated. That's stochastic terrorism. Well, that's the same shit that's going on here. When he's, like, making wild claims about how the election's stolen and all this stuff, and they're lying to you and all this other shit. Won't somebody do something about it? That's stochastic terrorism. That shit should be against the law. That's like, shouting fire in a crowded theater, almost. Especially when you're dealing with these, like, deranged, brainwashed fucking right-wingers, who think that they're, like, on a mission from God in order to, like, stop the evil fucking, Satan-worshipping Democrats from taking over and, like, forcing abortions on everybody or whatever. Right? Ridiculous. So that came to my attention. That's just another example, A couple of other ones that have been happening. They're all around the country. The QAnon people, the Maga people are still melting down, still going nuts. They're seemingly revolting against the GOP, which can only be good news. But is it really good news? Because what happens if they destroy the GOP? What happens to these people? Where do they go? What are they gonna turn on? Right. So you're seeing in Georgia right now. Oh yeah. Sorry, the thing about alcohol is that it dehydrates you. So I need to drink some more liquids. Anyway, I don't want to drink too much because I'll end up having to take a bathroom break through this. So yeah, we're seeing in Georgia how the GOP is kind of turning their back on, or the MAGA people rather are kind of turning their back on the GOP. Right. Which is, great, and I hope that they lose the special election there because of it. But it's sort of happening around the rest of the country too, a little bit. You're starting to see death threats against, like, Republican, local Republican politicians who are not going along with the stolen election delusion. Brian Kemp in Georgia is getting death threats. Um, People around the country last week when they were like, you know, certifying the election in different states over the last month or so, they've had to do it under guard, right? Because, you know, local officials in Michigan and in Wisconsin and stuff like that are constantly getting death threats from people. We saw, here's one that I saw, a Dodge City, Kansas mayor, or sorry, the mayor of Dodge City in Kansas has resigned over death threats. She was Republican. Her name is Joyce Warshaw. I won't, let me just copy that link address. I'm not going to actually go to that story, but I'll put it in the chat there for you guys, you know, so you guys can check that out. That's kind of fucked up. It's basically, you know, Dodge City is you know, deep in the heart of Kansas. And you remember Kansas is very, very red. That's where Rand Paul, that's where they're from. Mitch McConnell is from Kansas. So it's like, you know, Kansas is a very important red state. And they're kind of losing their minds over there too. You know, this is about, in Dodge City, this particular story that I just posted the link to is about mask mandates. Because, you know, we are now, when it comes to the pandemic, right back, not even right back where we were when it started back in February and March. It's even worse now than it was back then. You know, more people are dying. There's more infections now, you know. In fact, I'm going to go over here and hit up, you know, let's just take a look for coronavirus deaths. Okay. Which is very nice because you can get this right off of Google. You don't have to go any really weird ass, you know, websites or anything like this. Okay. This is California. If you look at the number of deaths in California, do you see how this is? Everything's cool. It kind of goes down a little bit. Thanksgiving, bam, shoots way the hell up. Right. This is just California. How many did we get? 398. That's 2 days ago. So this is a massive spike. Let's take a look at the entire country. Okay, see, this is where the peak was, right, back in April. And then we had a spike here for some reason. I'm not sure what's going on with that. I'll have to look into that. I think this had to do with reporting, you know, or actually, yeah, there was the way that these deaths were reported, you know, had something to do with that. I have to look that up. But you look, it still kind of goes, you know, there's a huge spike, kind of goes down a little bit, you know, it goes up, goes down. It's still sort of hanging around the same. You know, although it rarely stays above or rarely goes below 500 deaths a day. I mean, so remember that. Pretty much every single week for the last year, we've had something like, you know, a couple of thousand people dying per week. And now it shoots way the hell up until, you know, on December 16th, we had 3,611 people dying in a single fucking day. And if you look at, you know, how many total deaths, 315,000 so far cumulative, right? If we look at the number of new cases, it's even crazier. The new number of new cases is higher now. This is on nationwide here. Higher now than it has been the entire year. Okay. December 11th, look at that. December 11th, one day. 280, 514 cases in a single day. That's nuts. That's absolutely nuts. You see here, there was a little spike here after the 4th of July. Not that big. You know, people were out there partying and shit like that, you know. But we were right in the middle of lockdowns during that point. And a lot of remember during this portion, all the way up until like October and stuff like that, lots of places in the country were relatively unaffected by the pandemic. Places like, you know, Wyoming, Montana, you know, they didn't really. It was mostly major population centers, you know, that were feeling the effects of it at that point. You know, Los Angeles, you know, San Francisco, New York for sure. New York was like a major hotbed. Miami, you know, major cities, right? And this now, what we're seeing here is the entire rest of the country, you know, right around October or so. that's when it started hitting the red states. That's when it started hitting places like Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, shit like that, right? Kentucky. Okay. And if you look, even if I were to go to Kentucky here, you know, it would still be rather small, like looking at, but see how like this is just the number of cases, right? All throughout this year in Kentucky, oh, it's nothing, it's fine, it's cool. Like during this point, they probably didn't even need a mask mandate. They didn't need to shut down. It was still kind of low, started to get a little high up here in the middle of the summer. Now look at it. Now the number of cases, it's right up there with what you would see. Look at that. 4,600. That's right up there with what you would see in California, right up there with what you would see in New York at the beginning of this year. So it's starting to hit everywhere else in the country at this point, you know. And let me turn this off. This is depressing shit. Right? Starting to hit all these places where, in the country that pretty much got away with it this entire year. Now they have to actually like close down for real. Now they have to because people there are starting to get infected. People there are going to start dying, and we're going to start, they're starting to see problems that they didn't have before. Places like, Los Angeles and New York have been dealing with this whole time. ICU beds in Los Angeles, ICU beds are at a premium now. They're starting to run out of them, They're doing things like they're getting nurses that normally don't help, don't work with people in the ICU, and they're training them. They're getting like pediatric nurses and shit like that, and they're double training them so that they can like work in the ICU because they're running out of people. They're start like every time like they're going, okay, well, you need heart surgery, but we're gonna have to reschedule this for later because we don't have enough beds. This is the scenario that they've been trying to avoid this entire time, running out of space in hospitals, because now you're going to start seeing people seriously die. So it won't even just be people from, COVID. It'll be people like someone will like really need a, heart surgery, and he can't get it because there's no beds. So then they go, okay, well, we think you can go another month without it, and they'll schedule it for a month, and then the guy's going to have a heart attack and die. Shit like that's going to happen. People who have cancer, and they need an operation to get rid of a tumor or something, and they can't do it, so they let it go for a little while longer, and now the cancer is going to spread out of control, and it's going to kill them. This is what's going to happen. So it's not just people getting sick from the pandemic and not being able to get, help, not being able to get the medicine or the, put on a respirator or something like that. It's all the other diseases as well. That's the worst case scenario, right? And you're starting to see that in, that's what you're going to see in Kansas, right? Now, think about it, because they're at, like people in Kansas, people in Kentucky, they're just starting to get the major wave right now that the major cities on the east and the west coast got back in, the beginning of the year for the first time, right? So now it's like, now they're really going to flip out. They're really going to go fucking crazy because they're not ready for it because they didn't take it seriously this whole time, right? But now you're also seeing, well, these are also the hotbeds of places where people like the anti-maskers, right? Because they're filled with conservatives, right? They're filled with conservatives, and conservatives tend to not give a shit about other people. They don't care. It's like they don't want to wear a mask because fuck you. That's why. There's no other reason, Everywhere else, it's like, why do you wear a mask, right? Does the mask actually help you? This is what you're going to hear from these people, right? Well, the virus is microscopic. It's going to go through the mask. It doesn't help me, so I'm not going to wear it, because they don't want to take any of the basic fucking precautions in order to keep other people safe. See, the reason why you wear a mask is, yes, it's a barrier against aerosolized, water droplets. So someone sneezes in your face, you wear a mask, that's a barrier against that. And some of it might get through, but it might be enough to, it might stop enough of it from getting through in order to get you sick. See, because it's not just one virus that gets you sick. You need a sufficient viral load in order to actually like get sick. So it has to be you have to get enough of it in order for it to kind of take root, essentially, right? That's the mask is the first line of defense against that. It might stop, The second line is that, well, it prevents, if you, let's say you cough or you sneeze and you're a carrier and you don't know it and you have a mask on, that's another barrier that prevents it from getting out of your face area into someone else's face, right? So it's like two people wearing a mask is double the protection, They're protecting you and you're protecting them, and that's how it works. And you see that in places that have mask mandates, right, the number of infections go down. And it's just, that's how the shit works. And that's why, doctors wear masks when they do surgery, for example, because they've been proven effective in order to spread these types of diseases, in order to stop the spread of these kinds of diseases. This is like shit that they've known this for like hundreds of years. I mean, if you go back to the 1918 pandemic, the Spanish flu pandemic, I think, was it 1918? I think so. Right, if you go back to that, the Spanish flu pandemic, and you look at pictures, people are wearing face masks, right, during that fucking pandemic. It's like, this is shit that they've known for 100 years, for crying out loud. People don't want to wear them. How come they don't want to wear them, right? Because, why? Because it's uncomfortable, because of freedom. That's all bullshit, man. Freedom kind of like I said this once before, but I'm going to kind of expand on this a little bit. When you get like conservatives and libertarians and shit, and they talk about freedom, it doesn't mean the same thing that it does to normal people. What would you say when you say the word freedom, or tyranny, for example, right? The state using its powers for the benefit of a few. That's what I would say tyranny is, right? A libertarian or a conservative would say something, tyranny is the state making me do something I don't want. So essentially, the state like imposing laws on me that I don't consent for or something. That's what they would say. It's like, yeah, okay, that's, I guess you could call that tyranny. But then you'll see, like, they'll say, well, give me an example of this kind of tyranny that you're talking about. And they'll say some shit like, well, making it a law to wear a seatbelt. That'll be tyranny. Right? I'm not kidding. There are people, and you would think, like, seatbelts, the fucking, you would think that, like, the story would be over on that it's been pretty much proved that seatbelts save lives, and why would anybody, like, object to wearing, like, a seatbelt? Like, common fucking sense safety regulations. When you get in a car accident, this keeps you from flying through the fucking windshield and dying, But there are people out there that think this is tyranny. There are people out there that say, well, I should be allowed to take the risk. That's what it is. And that basically comes back to a thing that Murray Rothbard said way back in the day, which was in a speech in defense of smoking and against anti-smoking regulations. So back in the 60s and shit, when they first figured out that smoking was bad for you, which, you would think in retrospect, it should make perfect sense that inhaling smoke will fucking fuck you up. Right? And I say this because, as someone who smoked, I actually used to smoke as a teenager and into my 20s. So, I'm not immune to this shit either, right? Anyway, but you would think, like, that's where that comes from. There was basically, he went on TV, Murray Rothbard, and went on TV and gave this passionate defense of smoking. And said, like, well, adults should be able to make the decision to put themselves at risk. And you should be allowed to put yourself at risk. That should be and yeah, okay, yeah, you should. You should be allowed to go skydiving or some shit like that, right? But there's a difference between allowing an adult, an adult to make an informed decision in order to take a risk for something, and, like, getting rid of safety regulations that have been proved to save lives. Because that's basically the explanation they'll give for wanting to cut things like the Food and Drug Administration. They'll say, oh, we don't need all this testing when it comes to drugs and stuff because adults can make informed decisions and should be allowed to take risks. And the problem is that, well, adults are not informed. That's the problem. People are not informed. You don't actually know if you're getting the right fucking information when it comes to the side effects of a drug or something, for example. When you go to the drug company and ask them, they're going to tell you that there's no side effects. Why? Because they want to make money selling their drug. So they're not going to come to you and just be like, oh yeah, this drug is absolutely fine and you can take it, it's good for pregnant women and it's good for children and it's good for seniors and you can give it to your cat. Everything's cool. They're not going to disclose to you that in 9 times out of 10 it makes people's dicks explode or something. Right? So yeah, exactly. So, and that's the thing. It's like, oh, okay, getting back to seatbelts, right? Well, I should be allowed to, the government shouldn't be forced, or I shouldn't be forced to take safety precautions I don't want, Well, you got to think about it like this, okay? Why does the government put in safety laws in the first place? Okay, because this is why, all right? Because it doesn't matter if you yourself as an individual want to take a risk. That doesn't matter. No one gives a shit if you yourself die. Okay? Nobody cares. Literally, society will go on and, and within a couple of years, it'll be like you were never there in the first place. That's what happens, your family and friends and shit, yeah, okay, they'll cry, whatever, blah, blah, blah. In the grand scheme of things, your individual death is not going to affect anything. So nobody cares. Yeah, go ahead, jump off a building. Go base diving if you want. Nobody gives a shit, right? Engage in any of the kind of, go smoke, go take drugs, go fucking, smoke all the crack you want, whatever. Literally no one gives a fuck. If you live or die, it's fine. Go ahead, do your thing. But when 35,000 people a year die because of one particular thing, because they don't wear their seatbelts, right? Or because they take a drug, or something like that, because they die of cancer from smoking, or, some fucking medicine that they're taking is giving them fucking brain embolisms or whatever. When thousands and thousands of people die in the aggregate, then that's a problem. Then the government does have a mandate to step in and be like, okay, we have to stop these people from dying. Why are they dying? What's going on here? Okay, is it this drug that they're taking, etc.? And they, and that's what the government is there for. The government is there to protect, and one of the functions of a legitimate government is to ensure the general welfare and, basically stop people from, dying, right? Whether that comes from a product that a company is selling, this toy, fucking lawn darts or whatever, children are stabbing themselves through the fucking eyes with these lawn darts, we're going to outlaw those, or something like that, or whether it's a drug, this medicine is fucking making people's hearts explode, we're going to get rid of that, fen-phen or whatever, I don't know if you guys remember fen-phen, right? Whether it's fucking a consumer product, tobacco is a consumer product. Okay, well, we won't outlaw it, but we're going to put stickers all over it telling people what'll happen to them if they smoke it. And we're going to prevent it being sold to kids. And seatbelts, too. All cars have to have seatbelts, and if you don't wear your seatbelt, we're giving you a ticket. That's not even a universal thing. Like in Montana and shit. You don't get a ticket if you don't wear a seatbelt. At least last I checked. Last I checked in Montana, you can drive with an open container in the car. Right? So it's the laws are different around the country or whatever, but that doesn't change the fundamental principle that it's, not tyranny when the government, enforces fucking safety regulations, right? But this is what you'll hear. This is what you'll hear from the right wing, and they're trying to pull the same shit when it comes to masks as well. I should, getting back to the subject at hand here, right? They're trying to pull the same shit. Yeah, well, I'm an informed adult, and if I want to get COVID, if I want to take the risk of getting it, then I'm going to do it, and I should be allowed to. Yeah, okay, that's fine. That's nifty. No one gives a fuck if you yourself get it, okay? But you could spread it to other people, right? That's the thing. That's the insidious thing with this disease, right? 40% of the people who are exposed to it are asymptomatic carriers. You know, that is to say, they have it, they have no symptoms, they're spreading it to other people, right? 40% of people, that's why it's so high. That's more than the flu. That's more than the common cold. That's, you don't see like the common cold. 40% of people just have no symptoms, right? That's what makes this so insidious. That's why this shit is hung around for an entire year. Okay? Usually these types of things, they tend to burn out after a certain amount of time. You know what I mean? There'll be a season. That's why you get a flu season. Flu shows up for a couple of months and then goes away. And then it comes back again a year later. Stuff like that, right? But this is not, you notice this has just been, this pandemic has been ongoing for, what's it been, 10 months now? Started in February, 11 months, right? It hasn't burned itself out. It hasn't gone away. It hasn't stopped. And it's like, well, why? Because most people who have it don't know that they have it, right? So it's surviving in the population because, and here's the other thing about it, is that we don't know, like they're talking about vaccines and shit like that, right? There's a very good chance this vaccine will not prevent people from catching it again. Right? They don't know. They think they think so far, like I was reading about it, they think there's like a 90% chance that it will stop, a second infection. Right? But we don't know. That's what we're going to find out. They're going to vaccinate everybody, and if all goes well, it'll stop reinfection. But, there's already been people out there who have been infected and have come down with it more than once. It usually doesn't work that way, right? Usually you get a disease, and then you get antibodies, and then the antibodies stop you from getting the same strain of the disease again. That's normally how it works. And it's very rare for you to catch a disease twice. And it's like, well, why? Well, one reason why is because the antibodies don't hang around long enough, right? I mean, that's kind of like why you have to get booster shots and all that anyway. Your antibodies need a boost to keep them active, right? And it's like, well, someone catches this and then 2 months later catches it again. That's scary shit. Here's something that people haven't really thought about, kind of going off on a tangent here. What if, we get this vaccine, it vaccinates everybody, everybody's cool, and then next year it comes back again, and it's mutated, like the common cold mutates. Every year the common cold mutates, and that's why we don't have a vaccine for colds, right? Because it keeps changing so fast. What if COVID-19 changes? And next February comes back again, and the current vaccine doesn't stop it, and we have to go through this shit all over again. What if that happens? That's some scary shit, don't you think? That's freakish as hell, and I'm really hoping that scenario doesn't play out there. Hey folks, I need to take a bathroom break, so that's what I get for drinking beer and shit at 3 in the afternoon. So I see that there are some people watching. I'm just gonna go hit the head. Give me 2 minutes. I will be right back. Okay. Nope, kitty, stay out. Okay, we're back. Oy. Alright, sorry to keep you all waiting like that, but guess I should have planned ahead a little bit better. Okay, let's go ahead and turn off this guy. Oy, oy, oy. I guess this kind of segues into our next subject, which I want to talk about the stimulus package, right? Because, you know, shit is happening in the country, okay? We are in very, very dire straits here in the United States right now. People are hurting. We really need some help. Bad, okay? We've got roughly 12 million people who are on unemployment at this moment, right? Something like 30 million people, because of this pandemic and the lockdowns, lost their jobs over the course of this year, although the real number is probably closer to 60 or even 70 million people, right? And of those, roughly 20 million of them have not been able to find new work, right? Currently, there's about 12 million people on unemployment. So the difference there, you know, between people who are unemployed and the people who are on unemployment is that those are people who are not looking anymore for employment. They're not looking anymore. So they've either like just straight up given up, right, which is depressing, or they've decided to go back to school, or they may be like students or old people who decided to retire. Maybe they had the money, something like that. They could just retire. Or in cases, you know, they may be like housewives, things like that. Or they might not be the primary breadwinner, you know. So those were like, you know, roughly 8 million people who were working at the start of this year who are not working anymore, right? The other 12 are on unemployment of some kind, right? Which for up until now, they were getting a little bit extra in that unemployment. And that's going to go away here pretty soon. That ends, I think, the day after Christmas. Right. I think it's the day after Christmas. It might be like a week after Christmas, something like that. Right around there is where the extra government assistance goes away. So up until this point, if you were on unemployment, you got an extra $600 a week, right? I was on that myself for half of this year. I can tell you that was very nice. That allowed me to make my mortgage payment, right? Because normally, you know, I would get something like 450 in California. The maximum you can get is like 450 a week, which is fucking nothing. 450 a week, you can't live on that shit, right? So because of the extra $600, that brought it up to roughly $2,200 a month, and I was able to make my mortgage out of that, which is very nice. And this, you know, it actually helped me very well. It actually did what it was supposed to do. I went on it, you know, I was on it for like 6 months because of lockdowns and shit. I wasn't able to find a job in 6 months, but I eventually found a job, and I didn't have to go too much into my savings, although I did a little bit, you know. I was able to make my mortgage payments, right? My wife's income was able to pay for everything else, all the bills and food and shit like that. And it prevented me from getting into any major financial, you know, problems over the course of this year. And as a matter of fact, since now I'm working, I actually have more money now than when I started, which is nice. But, you know, I realize that I'm lucky. I'm not, you know, most people don't have the same situation that I have. You know, I actually have savings and shit. I you know, was making a significant amount of cash, so I got the most back that you can get, right? My wife has a really good job, right? She was able to help too. Most people out there are not able, you know, don't have the kind of you know, economic situation that I have, right? A lot of people out there are really hurting, and they were really hurting even before this whole thing started. Even before the pandemic started, the economy was already crap, right? It was already shitty before everything's happened, and now it's even worse, right? And most people like can't pay an unexpected bill for $400, right? That's where we were before COVID-19 came around. And, this has just made everything 10 times worse. And now we're seeing, for example, all of the protections they put in are about to expire, right? All of the extra benefits that you would get, that's going to go away, right? The eviction moratoriums are about to end as well. That's going to be crazy. What are we going to do when hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people suddenly find themselves homeless beginning January 1st? Right? That's some scary shit that's going to happen pretty soon here too. And something else that they don't really talk about very much is that the states themselves are running out of money because so many people are on government assistance. They're on unemployment. They're on welfare, things like that. Food banks, because so many people are taking advantages of these services, states around the country are starting to run out of money, right? And it's not just happening to the big states, the big blue states with the high populations. It's happening in the red states and everywhere else too, right? They're starting to go bankrupt. Well, a state, is not allowed to go bankrupt, right? A state does not have a sovereign currency. So, they can't really run deficits the same way that the federal government can. So that's why, when you hear about everybody bitch and moan about the debt and all that stuff, it doesn't really matter. All they really do is they just, increase inflation, debt goes down, right? That's how it works. Because, we have a sovereign currency in the United States. So it's like, basically, if they really wanted to get serious about paying off the debt and the deficit and all that, they'd just increase, interest rates and et cetera, et cetera. That's, subject for another video, but states can't actually do that. States have to work with the money they collect in taxes. And so they end up, states end up going bankrupt. What happens is that they have to cut things, or else you start seeing things like work furloughs, right? That was something that happened in California a lot, right? Because, I don't want to really get into it, but it was because California used to have a system where like all tax increases had to have a 75% majority in the state legislature. So for years and years, like a small minority of Republicans would block any tax increases. And California would then always be in the red, perpetually in the red, and they would have to cut things like, education, right? And, welfare programs, et cetera, et cetera. And it wasn't until we managed to get a Democratic majority in the state legislature that we were able to raise taxes. And now, for a long time, I don't think it's like this anymore, but for a long time, California was actually in the black. Why? Because they could raise fucking taxes, right? And I think it's because of the pandemic they might have like gone back into the red, but before that everything was cool, and it was like, and the reason why this has to be like this is because a state can't just go in perpetual debt. Eventually it'll collapse, right? So they need help. They need federal dollars. This is what you pay your taxes for, right? So when Uncle Sam shows up on April 15th and collects all that tax money from you, right, this is where it's supposed to go. It's supposed to go to help things like this situation, right? States going bankrupt because people are unemployed. The Fed should be jumping in here and giving the states money so that they can keep these programs going. Because if they don't, then, what'll happen is that the state they'll be forced to stop paying unemployment. And can you imagine when that should happen? When you have 12 million people who are depending on that in order to, like, not just, buy food, right? But they're depending on that to pay bills, right? To keep their power on, to pay their rent, to pay their mortgages, to pay their fucking car payments and shit. Can you imagine if that shit went away? Not only would you have like an epidemic of people getting kicked out of their houses, evicted, you'd have, you know, people's automobiles getting repossessed, right? Power getting shut off, water getting shut off, stuff like that. People not being able to go to the doctor, by not being able to buy medicine, people dying because they don't have the medicine that they used to be able to buy, right? And all of that's going to have a ripple effect. If they allow the states to go bankrupt and to stop paying unemployment, to stop paying welfare, it's going to have a ripple effect that's going to go through the economy, and it's going to make everything just that much harder to, pull us out of. It's going to dig the hole that much deeper. This is Great Depression shit right here. That's what this is. This is Great Depression level scariness that we're seeing, right? I mean, this is like, go back to the Great Depression and read about the causes of it. And it's like essentially dominoes. One piece of the economy breaks, and that, other pieces around it absorb the shock, and then they break and they break and they break, so on and so forth. Pretty soon the government's not going to have the money. The federal government's not going to have the money they need because, they won't be able to collect it enough in taxes. And that's just going to be exasperated by the fact that over the last 20 years, we've cut taxes for the upper 1%, for the people who actually have all the money. We've cut them down to fucking like bare bones minimum of what they used to pay. A lot of these budget shortfalls and shit, if they would just raise taxes to where they fucking were back in the 70s, the 70s or even the 80s, right? Even after Ronald Reagan cut taxes that first time, if they would just raise it back to where it was back then, a lot of these shortfalls would go away, right? We wouldn't have a $20 trillion national debt. We wouldn't have a $4 trillion deficit, shit like that. But they don't do that because they would rather give money to rich and corporations and fucking make sure people like Paris Hilton get a tax cut before you get like fucking welfare. They would rather do that because Republicans are assholes. Republicans are assholes, and they use the government to steal from you. That's basically it. That's why. So this entire time, while all this shit is happening, while millions of people are losing their jobs, while hundreds of thousands of people have died, right? While the states are on the brink of fucking collapsing, all of that shit, Congress is sitting there twiddling their fucking pubic hairs doing nothing, right? And the reason why they're not doing anything is because of Mitch McConnell. That's why. See, they gave us one little tiny Peasley-ass fucking $1,200, stimulus like 8 months ago. Right. They gave us $1,200 for the entire fucking year. And then nothing afterwards. Right? We haven't gotten jack shit since then. And then they wonder why the economy's so shitty and why so many people are out of work. And it's like, well, gee, it's because nobody has any fucking money, you assholes. Because you got, you guys got too fucking greedy and gave it all away to like the rich people and the corporations, and that's why the economy's so shitty. They talk about what do they call them, PPE loans, right? And what those were, they were loans that were supposed to go to small businesses to keep them open. Okay, and in some respects that's actually worked, but something like, I think it was 60%, 70% of those loans went to giant corporations, right? $3 million went to companies that directly benefit Donald Trump himself and Jared Kushner, right? I even read an article, I wish I would have saved it, but I read an article that said that Jared Kushner was creating shell companies in order to take advantage of this, and that's how they managed to fucking divert $3 million from this fund, this emergency fund, into their own pockets. I'm gonna find that and try to put it in the didgeridoo or whatever the hell that thing's called, the little thing underneath the video. I'll try to find that and put a link to it there, because that was if that's true, if that's actually true, that's some jailable shit right there. That's something that that Trump himself could go to prison for, right? If he doesn't fucking pardon himself before he goes, before he leaves office. So that's some scary shit. But even like without that, millions and millions and millions of dollars that were supposed to go to small businesses, 60% of which are getting ready to close their doors permanently, right? In order to keep these things open, right? In order to keep them open, in order to keep people employed, in order to keep like the economy running so that people aren't evicted and they don't starve to death, shit like that. That's what that money was supposed to be for. And how did that happen? How did it all end up going to corporations? It was because that was kind of the idea in the first place. Steve Mnuchin, who's our Treasury Secretary, specifically set it up like that so that there would be no oversight, so that they can just kind of hand it out to whoever they wanted, which included all their top level donors. And that's why people like, that's why Amazon is getting fucking like, these, basically they're more like grants. They're loans that you don't have to pay back. Well, that's not a loan. If you don't have to pay it back, it's not a loan. And yeah, I know personally some small business owners who took advantage of this and managed to keep their businesses going. Okay, so I know that it wasn't 100% failure like that, but there should be no instance at all, ever, where a politician votes on a, or puts into practice, right, a policy which benefits them directly monetarily. There should be no policy like that whatsoever. There shouldn't even be the possibility of that happening. Jared Kushner and Donald Trump should not have benefited from this at all. There should have been specific controls in there that said none of this money, and not only that, but everyone in Congress, right? Everyone that works for the State Department, all of them, should have been like, all of you guys are not, if you get caught benefiting from this money at all, you have to pay it back. And, if we prove that you did it on purpose, you're going to prison. That's how it should be. Okay. Because if you don't do that, this is what fucking happens. That's the reason why it was such a big fucking deal when Trump didn't put all of his money into a blind trust and he didn't reveal his tax returns and all that stuff. That's why that should have been a bigger deal. That should have been a fucking, deal breaker for anyone who's a fiscal conservative, right? Anybody out there who actually, wants to prevent corruption. I mean, wasn't that Donald Trump's thing? I'm going to drain the swamp and all that shit. Yeah, you're going to drain the swamp, and in the meantime, you're going to fucking steal everything that isn't nailed down. And we're not even talking about the nickel and dime shit where he goes and charges, goes golfing at his own club and then charges the Secret Service a shitload of money to stay at his club or whatever. I mean, that's bullshit too. And that actually is something which I think is something he should go to jail for too. At the very least, that should have been impeachable. Right. This is some major shit though. Major shit, fucking taking loans that are supposed to be money that's supposed to be going to help small businesses and setting up a fake company, right? So that you get that money instead of somebody else with an actual real small business that actually employs people. That's just despicable. Absolutely despicable. And once again, if they can prove that actually happened, holy fucking shit. He's both of those guys should be spending the rest of their fucking lives in prison because of that. Because that's just disgusting. I mean, because think about how many people out there, over the course of this year have had their lives ruined, right? How many people have had relatives that have died? How many people have had businesses that have shut down, right? Or have had family members with businesses that have closed down, and then those people have to then they're unemployed, right? And now what's going to happen is now their fucking unemployment's going to go away, and they're not even going to have that. So they go a whole year, they're not able to work at the business they built at. They're not able to find a job anywhere because nobody's fucking hiring, right? And it's you can't do shit during a lockdown. You can't even get a fucking haircut during a lockdown, right? But you got to do it or else people are going to die. So here's the, these are the options that people have, okay? Get a job somewhere, expose yourself every day, to people like the general public or whatever, people who don't want to wear masks, whatever, right? Put yourself in danger or lose your house, get evicted, right? Lose your car, not be able to like pay your bills. That's the choice that we have in this country, right? I mean, not everybody can work from home, you know. Myself, I'm very lucky that I have a job that I'm able to work from home. I can set up right back using this exact table, right? And I can wake up in the morning and walk my dog, sit down here, and I don't even have to wear pants sometimes, although I always do. And I can work from home. Well, you can't work from home when you're a waiter. You know, you can't work from home when you're a janitor or when you're waiting tables, right? Or delivering food to people or pumping gas or any of the other jobs which have been determined, to be essential workers. You know, when you're working in an Amazon warehouse or whatever. You know, it's really funny how all the essential workers are the people that everybody makes fun of and calls them losers. You know, the people who have jobs who work in the restaurants and work in the gas stations and like that kind of thing. Those are all people that everybody like, abuses, calls them losers and shit like that. And it's funny how they're the ones that, retail workers, that kind of thing, they're the ones that seem to be actually keeping the economy going. They're the people that are determined to be essential workers, and you have to go out there and, right, and all that shit. While the people like me, right, I'm not an essential worker, the job I have, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but let's just say that I'm, not an essential worker, right? And, the people like me, we're the ones that, like, we aren't really helping the economy move that much at all anyway. I should be the one that's, I should be the one that should be forced to work, and they should be the ones that get paid to stay home, all right? That's how it should be fucking working, right? And, it should be like if you have to go work because your job is an essential job, you should get hazard pay. You should get paid more, And I include waiters and waitresses and people pumping gas and, like, guys working at car washes and, like, fucking, landscapers and barbers and hairdressers and all these people. I count all of those people as essential workers. They should all be getting, because they can't do their jobs without being in contact with people. Right? And if they have to keep their businesses open in order to keep shit running, they should all be getting paid hazard pay. If you work in a restaurant and you get called into work and, like, the guy should have to pay you extra because you're putting yourself in danger. That's what I think. If I was running this world, that's what I would do. Okay. But it's just funny how we're completely fucking backwards. The way we treat these people is completely backwards, completely the opposite of what their worth to the economy is. Right? It's unbelievable. Anyway, holy fucking shit. How do we even get on this? Okay, talking about stimulus. All right, sorry. Went off on a bit of a tangent there. So yeah, we're not doing that. We're not paying these people to stay home. We're not paying. We're not helping these people at all. And the reason we're not doing that is because of Mitch McConnell. And the reason why Mitch McConnell isn't doing it is because he wants to make it so that your employer has no liability if you get sick in your place of employment because they didn't take any basic precautions. So let's say, for example, your state has a mask mandate like they do in California, right? Or your city, Los Angeles has a mask mandate. You're not even supposed to be outside without a mask on in Los Angeles, like, or New York. New York has that too. If you're just even out in public without a mask in New York, cop will give you a ticket. All right. Let's say that you run a restaurant and, it's too expensive and you lose money if you, put your tables 6 feet apart. So you say, fuck it, I'm not going to do that. Or another example here, there's a restaurant down the street from me that is defying the closing orders. You know, they recently in Los Angeles put an order saying that if you, you know, no more outside dining because the numbers are so fucking high, right? You know, the numbers of infections are so huge that we're just going to stop outside dining. So now all restaurants have gone to takeout only. And there's a restaurant right down the street from me that is defying that order and staying open. And lo and behold, they're packed every night. Part of the reason they're packed every night is because they're the only place in town that's open, right? So people are going there. The other part is because they're holding fucking anti-mask rallies and shit there. You know, I showed some video in last week's stream of this place. You know, they're holding mask rallies, and there's people with fucking the Trump signs and don't tread on me signs and all this other shit. All these fucking right-wing morons. And it becomes a political thing so that they can go there and they can eat a fucking hamburger and not wear a mask and feel like they're sticking it to the man, when in real life they're, you know, exposing themselves to a disease like an idiot. And probably some of them are going to end up dying because of this shit, because they wanted to go eat a fucking cheese melt in public. Right? So let's say you work at that place, right? Well, you know, you're not getting any help from the government. You have to work, right? You don't have a choice. If you don't go to work, you're going to get fired, and you know, you're not getting any money to help you not put yourself in danger. And let's say the manager says you have to work tonight, and he's going to stay open. So you go there to work, and you end up getting sick, right? You end up getting sick because your manager wouldn't close the fucking place down like the city said he had to. Okay. So you go, well, I'm going to sue this guy because it's his fault that I got sick, because he's not following basic health protocols, right? He's not following the, you know, the mandates from the city that said you have to do this, this, and this. He's not following that. Seems like an open and shut case, doesn't it? Seems like, hey, this guy's clearly at fault because he's defying orders from the authorities, right? And he should be liable to pay damages, right? Mitch McConnell wants to take that away. That's what he's holding out for. He's holding out for a corporate liability shield, essentially, right? So where that, you know, you're no longer able to sue your place of employment if you get sick there because they weren't following health mandates, right? Not only that, right, but if it's determined by the Attorney General that your suit was meritless, right, because the only reason that you'll be able to sue now is if you can prove malicious intent. That's the only reason you'll be able to sue. So if you say, you have to be able to, you know, so if you can prove that your boss specifically set it up so that you would get sick, then you would have a case. And then if you're just saying, well, he just wasn't obeying whatever, then that's meritless. And according to this law, right? And if the Attorney General determines that your case was meritless, then that allows your employer to then countersue you for up to $50,000. This is what Mitch McConnell wants to put into the, you know, to the relief bill. This is why he's been holding out for months, okay? Because up until this point, you know, they have what they call the HEROES Act, right? And that was the House version of the stimulus bill. That shit passed back in May, okay? That has another, you know, money for the states. It's got money for evictions. It's got money for, you know, direct stimulus checks of $1,200. It had all of that shit. That's been sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk since May of this year, right? So for all this time, right, all this fucking time, he's been holding back on this because he wants this liability shield so that you can't sue your employer and your employer can sue you if you have the audacity to try to hold them accountable, right? This is why. Okay, so let's keep in mind, you know, and also provisions in this would exempt from, you know, your employer from all kinds of regulations that are already out there. right? Including OSHA. It would basically get rid of regulations in OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, and the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, and the Worker Adjustment and Retaining Notification Act, and the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. So basically, pieces of this would exempt them from all, at least temporarily, until the pandemic's over, from all of these other regulations, which are designed in order to keep you from getting exploited by your place of employment. So basically, what's he saying there? He's saying that, what he wants is a liability shield, and the ability for your employer to fire you for any reason whatsoever, right? And even in defiance of regulations that are already been there. Some of these have been there for decades, right? This is 1964 Civil Rights Act, Why? Why would they want to take that away? What the fuck? And it's disgusting. It's disgusting and ridiculous. And, the news media barely touches on this shit. Barely, they kind of do, like, the news media, right? Kind of, like, if you talk to, like, CNN and MSNBC and shit like that, the mainstream news media are constantly living in fear of being called liberal. That's the main, so they always try to do, like, both sides of the same shit when it comes to stuff like this. Right, so then they'll come up and they'll be like, well, Nancy Pelosi wants to hold out for more money in direct stimulus, and, Mitch McConnell wants a corporate, liability limits. And then they'll just leave it at that. It's like, well, no, tell people what he's trying to put in the bill, right? Lay out the details for people to see it so that they can see how fucking ridiculous and horrible it is, right? The good news is that the last I heard, this has been stripped out. This has been stripped out in a compromise, and on what they compromised on was less money for people. So if they pass the current version of the bill, it won't have this in it, but you'll only get a one-time payment of $600. Gee, that's gonna fucking help. Right? And, I guess it's better than nothing. But, when are we going to get, folks, something that's actually good? Because it seems like every time shit like this passes, this is what you always end up saying to yourself. Well, it's better than nothing. $1,200, that's not really going to help people. Well, it's better than nothing. Fuck it. And it's like, yeah, okay, the $1,200 was nice. It was a nice little windfall, that I, like, bought some stuff with, and then the rest I put in the bank. Okay, that's great. It didn't really help anybody, And if you think about it, if this passes, if that's an extra $600, that means for this entire year, they gave people $1,800. That's it? For the whole fucking year? In Canada, they're giving people $2,000 a month since the shit started. All right. In Great Britain, in England, right, they're paying companies 70% of wages. They're going to a company and saying, hey, don't lay people off. Here's a check for 70% of the wage for this person. Keep them employed. Right? How come we're not doing that shit? How come we're not demanding that kind of response from our politicians? How come our politicians are like, here's fucking, $1,800 for this entire year. There you go fuck yourself. And in the meantime, we're going to give all these corporations, like, a shitload of money, And then we, like, smile and take it. And not only that, the people responsible for it get 78 million people to vote for him or whatever. What was it? 73 million people vote for him. Right? The Republicans fucking, like, get millions and millions of people just, like, who support this shit. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how bad we get screwed in this country, and how, like, half of the people in the country want it. They want it like that. it's just, I don't know, man. Like, at what point do you just fucking, I don't know. At what point, like, do you decide to, like, you know, jeez, I'm kind of at a loss for words for this part. So anyway, yeah, let's just keep that all in mind. Let's keep that all in mind. This is what's really going on here. This is why we haven't gotten any fucking help. You know, it's because, you know, and because you always hear this stuff from people, and you're going to hear it a lot now that, you know, the Trump people are losing power, they're leaving office, and all of these things are going to start being blamed on the Democrats and Biden. You know, you're going to start hearing all this stuff about, oh, well, how come we're not doing anything? How come the deaths are so high? Just watch. You know, I guarantee it. I guarantee that the nanosecond that you know, Trump leaves office, suddenly the Republicans are going to start caring about the number of deaths and the number of infections, and they're going to start caring about how, like, states are out of money and you know, all of this stuff, and like how people, like, you know, need stimulus and how come we don't have it for them, blah blah blah. They're going to start giving a shit about all this because it's going to be Joe Biden's problem. And you're going to hear people say shit. You're going to hear people say shit like, it was great when Donald Trump was here. You know, he was helping people. How come Biden isn't? Guaranteed. Guaranteed, you know, because that's why they're allowing all this shit to expire, you know. That's why they kind of, you know, McConnell doesn't give a fuck anymore. And that's why he's going to allow millions of people to get, you know, to lose their homes and to lose their jobs and for states to go bankrupt. Right? He's going to, like, sit on this shit and stop it from fucking happening. You know, because they're setting it up for Joe Biden to take the blame for all of the bad shit that happened during the Trump years. Guaranteed. You know, I just heard on the news today that they stopped the, you know, because there was like a long period where they wouldn't even start the transition, right? And then they finally allowed the transition to go through, and now the Pentagon has stopped giving briefings to the Biden people. National security briefings. Which is funny because they stopped giving briefings like a couple of days after this massive, like, Russian cyber hack, you know, the news of that came out and stuff. So it's like, why are they doing that? Right? You know, and you got to remember, folks, you know, it's a one-way street here, because the Democrats never do shit like this to the Republicans. As a matter of fact, when Trump won the election in 2016, right, they were so unprepared on his side that they went and not only did the Obama people basically hold their hands through the entire transition, they didn't even have any of their own staff. They asked the Obama people to recommend some Republicans to them that they could, like, get on. I'm not making that up. They actually went to the Obama people, said, hey, can you recommend some Republican, you know, personnel that we can, like, get on our staff here? Because they weren't prepared at all, right? They weren't for their transition whatsoever. So it was like, you know, the Obama people had to basically, like, fucking walk them through their transition, Trump's transition, right? They had to, like, hold their hands, you know, and do all the work for them, because the Trump people just had no, even back then, even before they took office, they were like utter fucking incompetence, you know. And now it's like, now Trump's team is like leaving, and they're doing everything they fucking can, everything that's humanly possible to fuck up, like, Joe Biden, you know, on purpose. It's ridiculous. You know, they're setting all of these crises, you know, to get even worse. I mean, they're already crises now. They're setting all this shit to, like, explode when Joe Biden takes office, right? So that he can get blamed for it. And this is the strategy that they've come up with, so that in, you know, 2022, when you get the midterms, the Democrats are going to get crushed. And that's going to happen. That's what's going to happen, you know. Hopefully, if these two assholes in Georgia lose their elections and the Democrats manage to take the Senate, they might be able to stop some of this shit. They might be able to actually pass some real stimulus, right? They might actually be able to get some real help to people. They might actually be able to, like, you know, show what actual governance looks like. But I'm not too confident about that. Looking at the polls in Georgia, it looks like fucking those two snake oil fucking insider trader assholes on the Republican side are probably going to win that election. What's their name? Kelly Loeffler and then somebody else. I can't remember the other guy's name. Dick Perdue, maybe. I can't remember their names, but basically they were the two Republican candidates in Georgia got busted with some insider trading deals and shit. And looks like they're probably going to win that election there. So we're pretty much screwed. And expect that to happen in 2022. Expect there to be a, you know, Republican sweep in the House. They might even take the House, you know, but expect them to lose some seats in the House at least, and probably hang on to the Senate even more. And expect lots and lots of obstruction on the Republican side all throughout Joe Biden's presidency. You know, everything up to and including judges, right, or any meaningful legislation getting by. I wouldn't even put it past them to refuse him to allow them to refuse Joe Biden to fill another Supreme Court seat if that becomes available again. Just watch. That's what's going to happen. You know, that's what's going to happen. That's just the world we're living in here, folks. And it's just like, you know, the fight against fascism never ends, right? That's what we're seeing right now. We're kind of in a temporary lull, you know, a temporary lull that we basically just, you know, we're kind of, it's just a speed bump, right, on the road to this country being, you know, utterly dominated by fascists, right? I really don't have a lot of confidence anymore in the ability of the left in this country to effectively fight back, right? I think that we're too divided. I think our politicians are either naive or, you know, corrupt as well, or, you know, just like, I don't know, too Pollyannish. Is that how you say that? In order to effectively use the, you know, wheels of government to, you know, effectively, I guess, use the powers of government to stop this sort of fascist takeover. And I think probably within my lifetime we're going to see the, you know, complete 100% fascist takeover of the government. It'll probably happen within my lifetime, you know. As to what happens after that, I don't know. You know, fascist regimes tend to not last very long. You know what I mean? They either self-destruct or implode, or there's a revolution of some kind. Whether that's a political revolution or an actual violent revolution, I couldn't say. In the United States, it's more likely going to be a political revolution. I think it'll be short-lived. When it finally does happen, when, you know, President Donald Trump Jr. or some shit in, like, the year fucking, you know, 2030, like, manages to steal the election or some shit like that, and then just fucking spends the next 4 years, like, you know, ripping off the federal treasury or whatever. I think when that finally does happen, it'll be very short-lived. And then whatever happens after that, I don't know. But, you know, it's not over. That's what I'm saying. It's not over. If we can't, you know, if we can look at the type of crises we have today in this country, right? Things like a pandemic, things like a Great Depression, right? Looming, not just stuff, you know, this is not stuff that's looming that's going to happen in a few years, you know, or this isn't even stuff that, like, say, like global climate change that you can see the effects of right now. Like, this is shit that's in your face. These are actual major crises that are affecting people's lives all around the entire country. And if we can see shit like this and not do anything about it and have half of the population, you know, encourage that, then there's not a lot of hope for us. There really isn't. If half of the fucking country can't get their head out of their ass long enough to realize that giving people money to stay home so they don't get sick is a good thing, then we're pretty much fucking screwed. So, and it's not gonna, it's not gonna help, how many like fucking like times you go vote if the people that are really causing the problems keep getting reelected. We need to attack them where they live. We need to go send someone to fucking Kentucky, and take on Mitch McConnell. That's what we need. We need like an AOC kind of figure to go move to Kentucky and challenge Mitch McConnell. We need people with bold ideas, to actually like fight for people. You know what I'm saying? We need people like Bernie Sanders and shit like that, but they're not enough. That's the problem. Bernie Sanders and AOC and Rashida Tlaib and all those people, they're not enough. They're not strong enough yet in the government in order to get what they need. And they need all of us. We need people to like, yeah, we have people marching for equality and to stop police brutality and stuff like that. How come we don't have people marching for, a $15 minimum wage? We need people in the streets marching for that. We need people in the streets marching for Medicare for all. Marching for a fucking Green New Deal in order to stop global climate change, right? We need people like marching in the streets to like, pass this shit that's actually going to help us, that could like possibly like solve some of these crises, or at least mitigate them enough so that we don't destroy fucking civilization. Right? That's what we fucking need in this country, and we're not getting it because the left is not strong enough in this country. Half of the fucking people on the left are like too busy complaining that some TV show, has characters that are like saying some fucking like, some shit that isn't PC or whatever, or like they're complaining about video games and stuff, or whatnot. And then the other half is like, fucking just like keyboard warriors who don't actually do any like work, right? Who won't actually like commit themselves into any sort of activist causes or whatever. That's what we've got in this fucking country. The left is very divided here. And it's no fucking wonder that we don't even have, I don't know. It's no wonder that it's like, why we don't have some of the basic policies that you see in other countries around the world. Things like universal health care. Yeah, we're not going to get that until we actually like force them to give it to us. And the people who would be the ones that would do that in this country are not organized. So, I don't know, folks. Be happy with what you got, I guess. Let's read some of the comments here. We're getting close to 2 hours, so let's read some of the comments. Did I get through most of the shit that I wanted to get through? There was one thing about fake electors trying to deliver votes to Arizona for Donald Trump. That was some crazy shit, and I don't know if you've heard about this. You know what? I don't want to spend too much time on it, but we should have talked about this back when we were talking about Maga losing their minds. But there's a link to it. Basically, a bunch of sovereign citizen types showed up to the Arizona State House and delivered phony baloney electors, when they were certifying the election. And it's like, I don't know, that's just some wacky shit that I thought was crazy. But anyway, let's read some of the comments from you guys here before we end this. Let's let's see what we got. Plus, I gotta walk my dogs here in about 15 minutes, so let's go through the comments here. Let's see, Dynacat. Thank you for joining, Dynacat. I think you actually made most of the comments. Let's see. It's weird to me that those people can't figure out that they are a sick joke. They really shouldn't have takeout for the 14-year-old kid with a sniper at Ruby Ridge. If they had some sense about it, that wouldn't have made such a stink. Yeah, that was one of the things at Ruby Ridge. Yeah, there was a kid that got shot, and Ruby Ridge was a clusterfuck. Let's not mince words about it. It was basically, if I remember right, it's been a number of years. There was the guy that was at, like in a cabin, he was home with his family or whatever, and he was wanted for some illegal weapons charges or something like that. and the ATF kind of surrounded his house or whatever. And, after like, I think a couple of, was it like days or even weeks of negotiations or something, they decided to just kind of like move in, and they ended up shooting a 14-year-old kid. And yeah, I could see, people would be pissed. I could see that why people were angry about it. Because it was basically a clusterfuck. It was all fucked up. It was like, something that they could have de-escalated a lot, at the same time. But at the same time, it's sort of like, like how much like so they kind of already go easy on right-wing extremists to begin with, right? Now, there are children involved in this case, so the authorities should have done everything they could in order to negotiate and allow those children to get away. Right. That's what should have happened, right? As to how do you actually do that at the same time, I don't know. Because what if the guy just refused and said, I'm not coming out, and my kid is not coming out. So what do? You keep giving him food because you don't want the kid to starve? Like, because normally what you would do in that case is you would shut off all the water, you'd shut off all the power, and you just wait them out. And then eventually they'd, like, give up because they're going to, like, die of thirst or whatever. But if there are children involved in that case, it's like, well, that's kind of wrong. You have to make sure for the child's well-being that they have access to food and water and stuff. So it's like, I don't know. What do you do in that case, right? I'm not an expert. I couldn't say. I guess you get, like, hostage negotiators. And you bring them in there, and then you let them negotiate. And all that stuff. And, like, I don't know. So it definitely could have been handled way better, of course, and without loss of life or whatever. But I think the reason why I brought Ruby Ridge up is because it was kind of a focal point for, and even today, you'll hear, like, sort of libertarian right-wing militia types cite Ruby Ridge as one of the reasons why they don't trust the government. And it's just funny. It's because they don't trust the government when a Democrat's in charge, right? You never hear these people like, these are the same people who would fall down and kiss Trump's feet. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, okay, you trust the government when it's the guy that, like, you voted for, but when it's like a Democrat, suddenly the government becomes evil again, I guess, is what my point was about that. So I don't know. Ruby Ridge it's a very interesting case, and I guess, because it's been, 35 years at this point now, or something like that. I think Ruby Ridge happened in the 25 years. It happened in the early 90s, I think, maybe late 80s, something like that. I don't know. But definitely worth reading about. In fact, I think I should, like, go brush up on it because it's been a long time. Like, I read an entire book on it back in the day. God. What else we got here? Okay. Onward to Dystopia. Just dropping by to say hello. Get your umbrella. The Maga tears are expected throughout the evening. Throughout the evening today? Why? What's going on today? Are they, like, certifying the Electoral College or something? I thought they already did that. I don't know. I'll have to look and see. Look and see what's going on with, out there. There must be some kind of, like, is it Congress today certifying the Electoral College? Is that what it is? Or are they actually voting today? I'm not sure. I'll have to look and see. I think they certified the electors already, so maybe they're actually, like, voting. I don't know. I'll have to go check. Dynacats. Their objective isn't to destroy the GOP, it's to use the threat to force the GOP leaders to break the law. Yeah. Yes, it is. That you're exactly right. And the thing about it is that, conservatives in general seem to be able to put that type of fear into their elected officials a lot easier than people on the left are. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like they're a lot more responsive to their voters' demands you know? Like, when it comes to Democrats, it's sort of like when you get Democrats and then, like, the way they talk and the way they treat progressives is sort of like, it's sort of like they know they've got us over the fucking chicken switch, you know what I'm saying? Like, um, it's sort of like they come to us, like the way they treat us is like, well, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna vote for Republicans? Like, sort of like that. They kind of know that they're the only game in town, so they don't really give us very much, you know. And if we ever want something from the Democratic Party, we have to kind of take it. You know what I mean? So, like, people like AOC, Bernie Sanders, Rashida Tlaib, like those, you know, the progressives, even someone who's like a milquetoast sort of semi pseudo progressive like Elizabeth Warren, you know, um, she's still very much centrist in a lot of ways, but even her, you know, she's got like some progressive ideals when it comes to like, you know, financial reform, that kind of thing. People like that, they only get elected because we subvert the will of the Democratic establishment. You know what I mean? And they'll run people that are much more corporatist, much more centrist against these people. You know, like for example, this last time they backed a very much the person that the establishment, the Democratic establishment, backed in opposition of AOC was very much a corporatist. And, you know, that guy got stomped, right? Tried to challenge AOC and he got annihilated. I can't remember his name, but, you know, the Democratic establishment is very much corporatist as well. You know, almost as corporatist as the Republican establishment is. You know, maybe a little bit less. You know, maybe they're a little more responsive to labor unions, for example, and that kind of thing. You know, and so it's like, yeah, so the wacky right wing has much more representatives, you know, in their pockets than the radical left wing, for sure. And it's kind of sad. I think we could take a lesson from them, you know, because what are they doing, for example, right now in Georgia? You know, they're basically revolting against the GOP. Like, we're not voting for you assholes unless you know, because they want these people to help Trump steal the election, right? So you would never see that on the Democratic side. You know, you would never see like people from the progressive wing saying, "Hey, we're not going to vote for you unless you come out for Medicare for all," for example. You know, like they wouldn't go to somebody like Nancy Pelosi and be like, "Okay, we're going to primary you. We're going to not vote at all, you know, and allow your seat to fall to the Republicans unless you come out for Medicare for all." That wouldn't happen. You know, people on the left vote much more strategically, and they'd be like, all right, well, Nancy Pelosi's better, right? Better than whatever Republicans, so I'll vote for it, right? And that's kind of fucked up because that's the thing. It's like, why is that? I really think it's because people on the left tend to understand what's at stake more, and they understand like, well, this person may not be exactly what I want, but they'll be better overall for the country. And I kind of have that stance too, a little bit. You know, I very much am someone who believes in compromising, and you know, would be someone who is willing to accept part of what I want in order to, you know, rather than getting none of it. I'm very much somebody like that. I would totally, for example, support a healthcare bill with a government option in it. You know, if like, say for example, they came out and they said, okay, we're not going to do Medicare for all, but we're going to give you a government option, and we'll expand Medicare to people who are 55 and older. You know, and yeah, okay, that's not exactly what I want. What I want is, my ideal thing would be like Medicare for everyone in the entire country. You know, a single payer health system. That's my ideal thing. But will I take this other thing? Yeah, I would. I would totally take it. Because why? Because it's better than what we have now by leaps and bounds, and would actually benefit millions of people. And it's like, well, fuck it. Like, it seems stingy to me, right, to not vote for that, to not support that. Well, Republicans would never fucking do that. Republicans would never do that because they don't give a shit about other people. They don't care that, oh, this thing will help these millions of people. Well, fuck it. I'm not getting what I want, so I'm going to destroy the entire thing. That's their mentality, right? And it's sort of like when if you ever get in a fight with someone who has no regard for personal safety, you know, like, have you ever done that? You ever just, like, gotten in a fight with a guy who's just a complete fucking animal and is just totally insane and, like, does not give a fuck about anything? That guy will kick your ass, right? If you're trying to fight a dude and, like, you know, you're trying to not kill him, you know, if you're holding back, like, if you're, like, wrestling with someone and you're like, oh, I better be careful, I might snap this guy's neck, you know, like, and you're holding back and shit, and then the other guy's not holding back, the other guy just doesn't fucking care, and he's frothing at the mouth like an animal, and he's trying to rip your eyes out and shit, the other guy will beat the shit out of you, you know, and that's, like, kind of what we're up against. It's like we're fighting with one hand tied behind our backs, and the Republicans aren't. The Republicans are just doing a fucking, like, slash and burn thing, right? So that's part of the reason, I think, why they tend to get more out of their politicians than we do. I don't know. I'm thinking we could expand that a little further, and maybe I might make an actual video out of that subject alone, because it's kind of interesting. Let's see. Tiny Cats. Talking about seatbelts. They always used to come up with stories about people who were thrown from their cars and lived while the car exploded and burned. Yeah, they did. I remember talking about things like that. Yeah, it's funny. And that's the thing. Here's the thing, is that may have actually happened once or twice. You know what I mean? There may have actually been a case somewhere where someone actually did get in a car accident and because they weren't wearing a seatbelt survived. But then they'll cite that as evidence, saying that this is why we don't need seatbelts, because of this one time this thing happened, you know. And that's kind of like, you know, par for the course, right? When people misrepresent evidence like that, that's something conservatives do all the time, you know. You ever, like, get in an argument with a creationist and they'll, like, bring up, like, really ridiculous disproved bullshit over and over and over, and it's like, it's almost like they don't really give a shit what the truth is. They don't actually care that the things they're saying aren't true. They're just using it as a justification for shit that they already want. That's what it is, you know. They're not, you know, it's like they have to convince themselves that, you know, this stuff is, like, not bullshit. Right? Instead of just straight out saying it, you know, it's more respectable if you were to just straight out say, yeah, I don't give a shit that it saves people's lives. I don't want to wear a seatbelt because I hate it. You know, that's really more respectable, in my opinion, than trying to come up with some horseshit that it's like, well, you actually save, you know, less people actually really die if you wear a seatbelt, blah, blah, blah. Like that, you know, if you don't wear it, you know, you're more likely to survive. It's like, don't feed me this horseshit. Just tell me what you really, you know, just tell me what you really want. I don't know. Okay. I think it's time to end this. It's 5:16. I gotta go feed my animals. I have 2 dogs and 3 cats, and they eat at 5 o'clock. And if I don't feed them at 5 o'clock, they start going nuts. This is where we're at so far, folks. It's coming along, you know. This is like an actual stain in the paper, because this piece of paper is like 20 years old. I just, like, found it in my closet, so fuck it. But, you know, once all of this is filled in, you won't even notice it. But yeah, I think it's coming along pretty good. You know, got sort of a weird kind of fleshy, spiky, mouthy, toothy eyeball thingy. So we'll keep on going with that for a little while. Let's go ahead and end this here, and let me go through my usual ending stuff. Let's see. First, I want to show you my DeviantArt thing. Then I want to show you my SD shop. Then I want to show you my webcomic. And I'm sure you've all seen these all before, but you know, I do notice that after I do a stream, I do get more hits on my social media, so it's worth showing this all to you people, I guess, right? Let's see here. Let me go back to this guy. Okay, and let me turn on my monitor, left monitor. All right, folks, this here is my DeviantArt website, so if you want to see more of my artwork, if you like what I do and you want to check me out here, please click on this. This will all be in the comments after the you know, thing publishes, right after the stream publishes. And I put up a lot of comics. I put up you know, these are things from my gallery, mostly comics at this point. But I have like more artwork here, you know. Here's some She-Ra artwork that I did. I don't know if you've ever seen She-Ra, the Netflix show. It's actually pretty cool. So I made them all into monsters. So if you like what I do and you want to see more of my artwork, please check me out on DeviantArt. What? Yeah, okay, whatever. Oh my god, fuck you. Just go to Etsy.com, you assholes. Alright. Okay, this is my Etsy shop. If you like what I do and you want to support me, please consider buying something from my shop. So I sell these prints here. You can see this one, for example, is a Lovecraft character. And these prints are, each one is hand stained. They all come out unique. They all look different, you know. So they'll tear it around the edges and then stain it, and I use coffee, stuff like that. And they kind of feel like, it kind of feels like leather after it's done. So it has a very sort of thick, leathery kind of texture. And, you know, I draw monsters and shit like that. This one's a Kraken, you know, this one's Cthulhu right here, right? So if you like what I do, please consider buying something. And then I'm also putting up some other things, like this is a sculpture that I made out of a styrofoam Halloween pumpkin. Kind of looks like a weird, disgusting, fleshy boil monster, you know, kind of thing. Right? So, you know, selling stuff like that. So if you want to support me, please consider going to my Etsy shop and buying something. I also have a webcomic. This is hawanja.com, fun for the whole stupid family. And this is about ninjas and that kind of thing. And there's kung fu and violence and, you know, monsters and demons and etc. Things blowing up and lots of profanity and people getting kicked in the head, that kind of stuff. So that's my webcomic at hawanja.com. And then I also have another YouTube channel where I talk about video games and toys and movies. I do live streaming. The other day I did a live stream of Super Mario Bros. 2 The Lost Levels from actual using real hardware, you know. I'm like not using emulators. I actually got it set up so I can like play through my video game collection again. So this is all on real hardware. And I look at toys and I talk about movies and like, you know, etc. and weird little gaming handhelds and things like that. So if you like all, you know, if you want to see me do some non-political content, please check me out on UCD videos. Anyway, guys, I think that's it. I think it's, we had a good stream this time. I, you know, went off on a few tangents or whatever, but that's okay. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Dynacat, for joining. Thank you, Onward to Dystopia. Thank you, Modern Monk Movement. And Louis the Hedgehog, how you doing? Thank you for joining, dude. I really appreciate all you guys. You guys are great. Thank you so much. And we will do this again, most likely next Saturday. So, thank you all, and I am out of here.